Welcome to our first panel from the Venture Lab Built Environment. We're very happy to have two distinguished guests today to discuss, starting from scratch, how to become and build a top startup in the built environment industry. And please raise your question. It's an open discussion. My name is Christos Chantzaras. I'm one of the two managing directors of the Venture Lab Built Environment. And here is my colleague.
My name is Tobias Förtsch. I'm the second managing director of the Venture Lab Built Environment. And a warm welcome to Tanja and Dénes and all the participants. So we will start with the introduction of one of our guests from Tanja Kufner. She is the head of startups and ventures at the Nemetschek Group. Nemetschek Group is one of our platinum partners of the Venture Lab Built Environment. And the Nemetschek Group is one of the worldwide leading software providers for the construction industry. And since 1998, Tanja has been actively an early stage investor working with several funds, CVCs, family offices. She also set up the Vira in Munich, maybe you already know that, the accelerator and co-working space in the inner city. And later she co-founded the startup Bootcamp for Smart Transportation Energy. That is a global accelerator around urban tech in Berlin. And she has invested in over 70 startups so far in various stages of growth and has helped enterprises such as Porsche, Mercedes-Benz, Airbus, Cisco, HERE, Kühne+Nagel, Telefonica, Siemens Mobile, and many others on their innovation journey. She's regularly recognized as one of the most influential women in venture capital, and Tanja joined Nemetschek Group in 2021. So Tanja, welcome, warm welcome on your side. And maybe, do you have any personal initial statement?
I thought about that, and it's so hard. I honestly think that every student that at some point has gone through learning, doing a degree of some sort, should really try to become an entrepreneur at some phase in their life. It's almost, I think it's almost a prerequisite. I think everybody needs to go out and try to be an entrepreneur at some phase in their life. So go do it. Just go build something meaningful.
Great, thank you very much for that statement, Tanja. Our second guest is Dénes Honus. He is a trained architect and business economist and already founded in 2013 the company Green City Solutions, a clean tech company for urban air purification. And after that, he moved on to become the chief commercial officer of Meter in 2019, which is a PropTech company providing the digital platform for all technical building equipment. But then he didn't stop, he continued and founded then Worthwhile Ventures, a family-owned investment vehicle, and he supports the transition to sustainable and carbon neutral society, does angel investments and offers his operational advice. We are very happy to have you here, Dénes, and also thank you for your statement. Dénes claims architects are in a top position to found a technology venture for the built environment, but they are in a terrible position to start an architectural practice. And we're happy to discuss with that further in the next 30 to 45 minutes.
Exactly. Thanks, Christos. So we will start asking 2 to 3 questions from our side, and then we really want you to motivate to ask your own questions to our guests. So, and I will start with the first question to Tanja. So what fascinates you personally in ventures in the built environment?
So I have to be honest with you guys. Tobias and Christos know this. I've been a really active investor, but I have no clue about architecture and the construction industry. So I transitioned from doing smart city tech and very much mobility and automotive to now this whole new industry. So I've spent about 8 months in this vertical now, and I'm fascinated because Nemetschek is a wonderful company with very, let's put it this way, beautiful, very globally recognized software products, but they're still perpetual licenses, right? This is really old school sort of software. And so learning all these SaaS and these super innovative new companies that architects are, there's so many niche problems to solve, right? So what I'm fascinated about is the sheer number and volume of startups trying to solve a similar problem with a different technical angle in the pre-planning and planning phase. And then also I'm obviously spending a lot of time in construction, and that's one industry that is probably the last to be digitized, right? It's insane. So learning the workflows, what a nightmare it is on construction sites, is so brilliant because there's so much to be done, right? So excited to learn about all the problems you're solving.
I mean, from the built environment industry, we can be happy that you focus now on this part to share your experience. To Dénes, the question a bit different. You are a trained architect, you are in the built environment industry already. How hard was it for you as an architect to start from scratch an entrepreneurial business, which is not a traditional architectural office?
Yeah, so as you already introduced me, I'm a bit of like the flip side of the coin to Tanja, if you want so, because I'm coming from the construction economy, and now like progressed a bit into like investments in whole the startup area. My first step, of course, on that way was actually out of university to found my own venture, and that was rather like, I mean, like most back in the days, I would say, so like it's nearly 10 years ago, it was more or less like by accident. So like we were a group of people who barely ever meet even on a campus or something like that. So there was a biologist and computer scientist, a mechanical engineer, and me as an architect. So like ones were like called the impossible team or the impossible group, because normally these kind of people do not found a company together, but we did, because we were all involved more or less into some research at the university. And we thought that this research, which was in the biotechnology part about cleaning air in cities while using moss, so plants, to do that this is something worth to bring to the world, right? So we thought like, okay, this is something we really want to engage with, and it's worth not dying at the university, not dying in the lab, but being brought outside into a world which is really in need of such kind of solution. And there was no other, like, I think, good chance for that solution to come to life than with a young, motivated, but completely idealist founders team, I would say. So if we would probably have had a clue in the beginning how hard and how long the journey would be, we probably would never have started. But as Columbus thought like 500 years ago that the way will be much, much shorter. So he decided to just start sailing. And that's actually what we did. So looking back, we were pretty glad that we did not know how long and how hard the journey will be. So it was hard to start at the end of the day, but like the circumstances were really like engaging for us because we really thought it's worth bringing this solution to the world.
One addition to that, Dénes, or Tanja, please.
I was going to ask, because this is curious. I'm so fascinated by universities like TUM having all these entrepreneurship centers like LMU. Did you guys have that entrepreneurial sort of support from the university to build this company, or did you guys go at it alone?
Yeah, we actually started it completely alone, to be very honest. So there was not, back in the day, because we founded it at TU Dresden, and there was this typical exist share, yeah, who's supporting like students from all university. And the research actually was done at the Center for Biological Components and Biological Research. So we took that research and brought it to the only possible chair we could think of to help us, which was the exist chair. And they just said, no, that's not an innovation. We're not going to support that. So we're really like completely on our own, saying like, okay, we thought this is a really good idea, but they claim it's not a good idea. So, you know, like, I don't know, like who of you knows about like, but at the exist, in this exist ecosphere, you have to have something which is called in German Innovationshöhe, so something like an innovational loop or a sprint forward, actually. And they just didn't see it. I think they just didn't understand it. So in the beginning, we were really completely on ourselves, putting our own money into like a little wooden box, saying like, okay, when we run out of that money, then we're going to stop. And we were like super lucky, actually. It was little skill and a lot of luck that we were never running out of money, because we always met somebody who was willing to help us and who believed like we did in the idea. So what kept us going, actually, at the end of the day.
Was it hard to go against the traditional career path of a civil engineer, of an architect, or of an environmental engineer, because you were starting something new with no support, as you said?
Yeah, actually, that might sound a bit stupid, but I had the chance, and this is like, I'm super grateful for that. I had the chance to make my internship at a very big and also very famous architectural practice in Paris at Renzo Piano building workshop, which was a great time, right? You're a young architectural student, you move to Paris, you're engaged in an extraordinary environment of architects, right? So you meet some of the most talented people in your area, probably worldwide. And then you have the time or the opportunity to spend time there and to engage with these people. And it was really amazing. It was a really good time. But at the end of the day, and this is the stupid part I started with, I realized that as an architect, you have very little influence at the end of the day. So you're building the world building by building, and it takes you very long, and your impact is actually rather limited, right? To just a few people with a very extent impact, I would say. But I was always more on the side, like saying, like, okay, I want to set up something which is, I didn't know that term back in the days, but something scalable. I wanted to have like a larger positive impact on as many people as possible. And being in Paris, working with these enormous, tremendously talented people in that practice, I realized that the impact of an architect is just step by step and rather little. So I decided that this is probably not the way I want to go.
I just watched the documentary of Bjarke Ingels.
Well,
you know, God, I had goosebumps. Yeah. I'm saving it for the weekend to watch again. But so he's managed it, right? But yeah.
He's managed it at the end of the day, true. But he also like, I mean, if you look, it's probably very good example to stick with, because Bjarke Ingels, I think, is not this kind of typical architect. Sure, he started as an architect, but he always had this like super innovative, super fancy approach to architecture, saying like, it must be playful, it must be meaningful, it must give something back. It's not just about the millimeter in the facade and how the shadow and everything. True, that's part of his work, but he was always pushing boundaries for being more innovative. And now he also like went on, right? He's not just doing buildings anymore. He's doing like research, 3D printing stuff for a colony on Mars, for example, or the Hyperloop train stations, or like this. So he's also getting more and more engaged with, and that's the point, technology, because technology is the number one component you need to make a scalable solution. And I think he realized that very, very, very early on, and just engaged his whole practice into becoming more and more part of this technology environment, like building the Google campus, for example. I think a very good example.
I don't want to hijack the conversation. So sorry, Tobias, but I think this is so interesting. Go on. One thing I found fascinating. So the last time I was in Munich and you guys had an event, there was an evening and there was a whole bunch of sort of young next generation family owned businesses. And there was a young architectural student that came up to me and she said, I want to learn more about Nemetschek. She says, I'm in my last semester at a university, I think in Aachen. And she had never once worked with any software as part of her degree. So no CAD, no BIM, nothing. And that blew my mind, because I'm so new in this industry. Is that possible? How, like, seriously?
It is possible. It depends on the educational agenda or strategy of the schools, of the architectural schools. There are some schools who really stick on handcraft or handmade drawings, who train that, who try to have this manual work at first. But there are also other schools who are quite advanced in pushing that, of course, as we at TUM, to push that, to at least have the main softwares used to make a semester with, let's say, Nemetschek or Allplan, or with Vectorworks to have a semester then, sorry to say, with Archicad or with AutoCAD. But you're right, we still are challenged by a very traditional approach to architecture and education.
And maybe this is a good point to hand over to our audience, because there are or might be some architectural students or former students from the TU Munich.
Okay, Stefan Kaufmann here, hi.
Hi, Stefan.
A former
So
student.
maybe you could answer this question.
Stefan.
I would say, Tanja, that this is basically only possible if she really insisted in not using any CAD tool. So who would just make a normal architectural studies anywhere in Germany will always have kind of CAD usage in anyhow in the Lehrplan. So, but there is always a couple of people. I would say there's maybe 5% of the students that somehow have an aversity against anything digital. And I think these people, they can manage not to learn a CAD tool properly.
Well, I go back to Dennis's point, right? Technology is key, like in all this great stuff that's being built right now. It's tremendous. And so many architects I'm speaking to, these founders, for example, Speckle is one of these great companies. They then go and learn how to code, right? So they're architects that then become developers and that then go out and build great shit, right? Amazing stuff.
Actually, Speckle was one guy I met through my work, which was really, he started with a PhD in this topic. He was an architect, and that's a great part to see that, similar to Dénes, he saw that with his concepts and ideas and technology, he can impact much more than just one building and influence much more. And that also to the audience who is here as an architect, please join to refer different career paths. But I would also raise one question to Tanja and to Dénes. So is there a characteristic where you see, okay, this is going to be a non-typical architect and a founder? Because you said Dénes Bjarke is not a typical architect. And maybe you are
In
also
my humble
a typical
opinion.
architect.
Well, I don't know. I can only refer from myself to the broader audience, which is probably always a bad idea. Still, I'm going to do that. When I'm looking back into my own studies, I was never the type of student who really cared a lot about, like, if the color has like 80% degree or 100% degree. So like how well the shading is done. So like I was never much really into details. I was always more on the like conceptual level, you probably would call it. Did also my diploma and my master's thesis on a more conceptual question. So I think like if you really are in deep love with like how the shadow goes on a specific material, on a stone, and what makes the difference between a certain kind of concrete regarding to another type of concrete, then probably you're the absolute right person to stick with architecture, because this is typically at the end of the day what architects are doing. But there's a second side to that question, and the second side is what, and this is also what my comment at the beginning, rather critical probably one, is based on, is that architects, because they are not so well integrated with technology, have a certain problem founding another office which will be exactly the same as all the other architectural practice you see on the market, right? So there will be, or there won't be much of a distinction. It will be yours, and that's great, right? If this is your dream, just go for it. I'm not the person telling you shouldn't do that. You should definitely do that if you think that this is your way. But think of architecture also like as a competitive question on the market. And there are a lot of very little architectural offices who stay little and have a really hard time actually existing and doing their projects because they do not have something which is called the competitive edge. So they're just all the same. It's like restaurants in one street, right? Okay, you have a Chinese restaurant, you have a Greek restaurant, and another restaurant, but that at the end of the day, they all serve you food. And if you're hungry, you probably don't care much about what kind of food you eat. So the problem is the competitive edge. And if you move yourself out of architecture, of the thinking that the only way you can go is to found your own architectural practice, then you would realize that there's a whole other world around you, doing a lot of many things. And most of these things are driven by technology. And technology is not just a very, very good indicator for scalability, but also for the competitive edge. If you go there and if you invent something nobody has ever invented before, but is desperately needed, then you have a tremendous competitive edge combined with the scalability of technology. And this is exactly what you want to go for.
And you might not be the one that has the idea, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, not everybody comes up in the morning with all these pain in the butt workflows that you guys have, right? And so either you have a problem that you're really suffering from, and you really want to find a solution, then go build it, right? That's what I'm seeing a lot of. But then if you don't, then go join one of these amazing startups that is doing stuff in that sector. It's unbelievable how many there are. I was just interviewing one of we're invested in a fund called Fundamental, and I love sharing experiences with Patrick, and we do this regular hour call with him, and we discuss these topics, like why in this particular industry there are so many point solutions, right? There are thousands of companies solving very specific solutions, and they're not always going to be the unicorns, right? That will make 100 billion. So there are a lot of VCs won't invest in some of these solutions because they can never be that 100 million revenue company. But honestly, who cares? Why don't you build a 20 million euro company or a 50 million euro company, right? So yeah, I find that fascinating.
Yeah, so no, I totally agree. And that's a very important point, right? That the moment you realize you're going to found a company, you will come in contact with the world of venture capital, of people telling you that scalability and growth is the only thing that matters. That's true, but it's only true for part of the world. Again, it's only one perspective on seeing the reality, and it's true for everybody coming out of venture capital, right? Because venture funds, people getting money from rich people to invest into startups, they need to see what you call 10x. So they need to see companies who can be 10 times more valuable at the end than they were in the beginning, because this is just like, I don't want to go too much into detail. Tanja, I think you can do much more, but this is just because their business model works like that. But at the end of the day, that also puts you, if you take the money from them, under tremendous pressure, right? And that's not your fault that this pressure is there. It's just part of the reality. And not every single business model, and I think this is also what Tanja referred to, is capable of doing such scalability or these kind of growth, right? But there are so many businesses worth building who are smaller and less fast growing than these kind of 10x, unicorn, whatsoever. And it's still super valuable to build these businesses because they're going to earn money. They're going to solve problems for many people. Hopefully, they're also going to do something good for the world. And imagine nobody would go and build these businesses. Wouldn't that be a shame? I think it would be.
Then one question to that. Do you think that the landscape, or also a question to Tanja, the landscape is kind of changing right now when you're speaking about growth is everything, and stuff like that? Do you see any more possibilities for smaller companies, for the so-called zebras, maybe, not the unicorns?
Tanja, do you want to go first?
Happy to. I mean, I can answer it with something we were going to talk about maybe a little bit later, but for example, one of the things I'm learning in this journey is that personally, we talked about this, right? I personally think corporates should not invest in early stage startups because they're going to kill them or they're going to destroy them. I can tell horror stories about how I tried to make, startups work with Vinci or Daimler and sort of what the outcome is. But in this particular industry, I'm changing my mind because somebody like a Nemetschek or like our competitors or that come from the industry can actually add value. Because apparently, I don't know if this is true, in the world of architects or even in the world of prop tech, everything is about reputation and sort of, so the minute you're aligned with a company or with, if somebody like an iPlan or a Vectorworks or Graphisoft can help you sell to their clients because you're solving a very specific technical problem, then for the first time in my life, I'm actually changing my mind that it's actually not such a bad idea to be a corporate, because it can actually add value, you know. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but let's get Dennis's point.
Add value also to small companies and keep them small and let them grow in a sustainable way, or do they then switch and want to maximize the growth then if it gets successful?
Yeah, they need to, right?
They have to, yeah.
Yeah, there's no other way, because like, you know, if you're getting in on an early stage and things are going linear, probably flat linear, then your fund goes for 10 years, right? So, and after 10 years, you have to give the money back. And if in that 10 years you double, then it's probably pretty impressive for every single one in that call. But for them, it won't be enough, right? Because like the bet goes into not doubling, but 10x. And that's just the point. So coming back to your question, Tobias, I don't know, actually, because I see two different developments who are probably going to be one again in the future. I hope so. So the one is that we see the more and more sustainable startups coming, right? And not sustainable startups in a way like we do good for the world, but we don't earn money. No. Sustainable startups trying to save the world, trying to solve social problem while earning money on a scalable way. And that's amazing. That's really great. And the other development goes a bit in the counter direction, that there's more and more money in the market. So there's so much money in the venture capital market. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's unreal, actually. It's unreal for me. And I'm in that business for 5 years, and it's unreal, actually. So there's just so much money in the market, which then comes to the point that these guys, they have the money and it comes in the back door, and they have to throw it out of the window as fast as they can just to make some investments. And what's happening is that this is driving the valuations of the startups. So if you're today sitting here, you have 3 people, you have a good idea and you know how to pitch and you know what a business plan is, it's likely you go out there and can raise €1 million for your idea. That would be impossible like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Impossible, like literally impossible. That may sound great on the first hand, but later on that might kill you too, because with that money there comes this pressure and there comes this expectation to scale something. And if you don't know how to do that, then you really run into a problem. So you have these sustainable startups coming more and more with viable business models, and you're having the pressure for more and more money in the market. My hope for the future is that these two lines just connect one day, and all this money goes into scalable, social, environmental impact startups. I mean, that would save the world. There's enough money to save the world. That's not the problem. It's just misaligned on the one hand, and there are not enough people like you guys founding the companies we need to save tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. But the beautiful thing is, on the flip side, there's so much of this money is flowing into the sustainability thing, right? So, which is, go build something. Look at the website of 2150, one of my favorite funds that is focusing on sustainability in the built environment, right? It's all around architects and construction. Yeah.
Do you have a question regarding that? We have 2 questions. Chiguan, we have not forgot you. We place your question then later on, but this one goes directly to what Dénes just said and goes also to Tanja. What potential do you currently see in the construction sector? And what do you think of social entrepreneurship in this sector as a contrast to maximization models? So is it a good thing to be in the construction sector right now? Or will the maximization model also go to the construction side sector?
Yeah, both actually. And that in this case, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing, because, and I think we've discussed it before, the increase in productivity in the construction sector over the last 20, 30, 40 years is unmatched bad, actually. So all the other industries have increased their efficiency tremendously, right? And I'm not just talking about IT businesses, who of course have increased the efficiency tremendously, but also automotive, airplane, whatsoever, all the traditional stuff, restaurants, everything, right? The construction industry is more or less where it was already 30 years ago. This is a very, very good indicator that this might be an industry you want to be in today, because it will be hopefully likely soon be disrupted by whatever kind of innovation, invention, whatsoever. So I think it's a good way to be there, a good place to be. And on the other hand, as we all probably know, it's an industry moving super slow, like super slow, and being like super conservative, but really like super conservative. And to break through here, you need the money. So what you could see here at the moment is an industry just waiting for being like really challenged and really disrupted. I don't know, going out there, 3D printing buildings, building buildings just only with the help of robots, whatever you can think of, right? Like just really like the crazy stuff. And for that, you will need a lot of money, and the money's there. So if you're lucky and if you're skilled, you can combine these two.
I have a question here in the group. Like, so my name is Dominic. I'm also a part of a young startup in the building industry, and I completely share your feelings. Then it's like it's very hard to disrupt such a market. Like, so the people are very slow paced. Like it's very hard also to bring innovation in it. Like, because like usually or they don't believe you, or like they are more like skeptical. So so what are your experience here in the methods to approach these people, or also to convince them that these can bring them forward, that this can bring their benefits that you are telling them?
Yeah, good question. So I'm working at the moment in a company selling to big housing associates and housing companies. Probably you know, like Vonovia, they own like 500,000 apartments in Germany. And if you talk to them, they're referred to themselves as concrete heads. So like seriously, like we think in the same material and we're made as of the same material as our buildings. And you can see that, right? They're moving super slow. They're not very innovative. So like, and the only thing you can go through here is just to go in and to be there and to stay there and to make them believe and to convince them that this is not going to go away, no matter how long they wait. They're used to waiting years. They're planning, their business plans are not 1 or 2 years like a startup. They do business plans for 10 years. So they think in decades. And the only thing actually, and this is probably the hardest you can aim for, but the only thing that would really help is to make them believe that you will be still there in 10 years, no matter what they do. And it's better to bet on you today than in 10 years, because then they will be in a pole position in 10 years. But there's no going away. You will be there in 10 years. And that needs time and a long, long breath.
But I also think, and Dénes is absolutely right, but I'm also seeing a lot of innovators, right? So there's a lot of companies that go find the innovative ones, right? Go talk to the other ones, talk to Dénes and Sommer that love to, sell innovation. They bring startups to all kinds of people. So, or Goldbeck, or there's so many cool companies that are thinking very differently. You just have to find those.
Yeah. I will give you a little insight, probably that helps. So for the company, we do at the moment the sales. The sales approach was to structure the market by how big the housing company is. So how big is the potential to sell if you roll out to all their estates and whatsoever. And frankly speaking, it didn't work out at all. So we came up with a new strategy, which works much better. So we were screening the market for newly appointed managing directors under the age of 40, and to address them. Yeah, and so like, and you wouldn't believe how this is accelerating sales at that point, because in the first step, it doesn't really matter how big the customer is, as long as you can put 5, 10, 20, 50 logos on your website saying, look, this is my customers. Nobody's checking like how big they are. Sure, you probably won't get a Vonovia, but like you will get big accounts in the industry. And with that, you can build the trust I've talked about. You will endure over a long period of time, and then you will push to the older guys. Unfortunately, there are no girls, so it's only the older guys. So this is.
And if I may ask a question, I'm Fabian, I'm part of Dominic's team. So we use BIM, generative design based on BIM to plan the technical systems in buildings, so Gebäudetechnik, completely autonomously. What is the best platform to go out there and like on a fair, or what is it that is interesting for the industry? Where is the industry setting for innovation in this case?
Yeah, you have to search for them. I would say they're not sitting somewhere and you can just enter a room and then they are there. But there are like you have to meet the right people, right? And if you, I mean, I just talked about these young managing directors, and it's hard to find them in the first place, but once you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of them, they will connect you to all the others, because you always move, whatever you want to do, you always move in a bubble of like-minded people, right? And the young managing directors in the housing industry, they connect to the young managing directors in the housing industry, right? So, and you have to find a way to get into that bubble, right? And that can be very hard in the beginning, from my experience. So you really have to go to a fair, you have to search on the internet, you have to go to, I don't know, you have to become member in some associations, even if it sounds super boring. You have to go to, I don't know, like managing director Dénes. You have to meet this first person who then introduces you to the second, to the third, and makes you part of that bubble.
And there's also more and more increasing tech events for startups in this environment, right? I'm open sourcing a calendar of that, and at Techstars, everybody uses it, even TechEU. And anyway, we talked about this. I'm happy to share it with you.
We get more and more questions about your personal startup story, Dénes.
So there were 2 regarding this question. One came from Chico, and right in the beginning, how far were your results in research field that you could apply it to industry? So was it already working that you could apply it? And is it now more about the market? And another question too regarding your startup is, how did you find your clients? What was your revenue model, and how do you implemented the idea in the later stage?
Yeah, so just to set the tone, we were so unprofessional in the beginning, you couldn't think of a worse team than we tried in the beginning. So no matter if you think that there's a barrier and you probably are not like professional enough, just do it. Like you cannot be less professional than I was in the beginning. Like seriously, it was just the lowest level you can imagine. So we thought that to answer the first question, that the research truly was done, and it's now about like getting the stuff literally out of the lab and into reality. While doing that, we realized, well, it's not as good as we thought, and we have to go at least 2 to 3 steps back just to make things really happen. So that was a major disappointment in the beginning, and we've spent thousands, like tens of thousands of euros on physical hardware prototypes that did not work, not at all, or just a little bit. So like, we thought, okay, we'll just climb up the ladder by building prototypes and learning from every prototype what's working, what's not working. And it was not working at all in the beginning. It was super frustrating. Like we were spending 2 years of our lives building stuff that did not work at all. And it was really close to say, okay, guys, like, you know what? This is just not working. This is just not working. We thought it is working. It worked in protected lab environment, but there's no way to get it out of the laboratory and bring it into the real world. And looking back, I really can't tell you what it was, but that we just kept going, right? And there was a moment where things just started to work. And it's super hard to say, looking back, why that happened, but things just started to work, right? So like sometimes, like I have the feeling, if you're persistent enough and you stay as long as you can with something, then like in the beginning, reality pushes you down, and then there comes this moment where reality realizes, okay, there's no pushing down, so reality adapts to what you want to see in the world. And then, I don't know, it just flows, right? So like we're building, like literally the first customer we had was walking into our door, like into our door. We never met him before. The moment, I think it was 1 week after we were building the first prototype, who did not kill the moss within the first days. So and that came together. It's like the first working prototype after 2 years of failure, combined within 1 week with the customer saying, I want to buy this. And we were saying like, no, we can't. It's just the first prototype after 2 years, which is not burning after a week. He said like, I don't care, I want to buy it. And I give you the money. I said like, yeah, but we need a lot of money for that, and it's not worth it. I don't care, I give you the money. So like, sometimes then the things just come together, and it's just pure luck, actually.
But can I now address something that you're saying, Dénes, which is I get this all the time from founders, like, what does it take to become a successful founder? That's it. It's the grit and the resilience, right? You need to, that is like the trait that everyone's looking for. That's the holy grail. How do you figure out how to be that resilient and that, I mean, fall down 150 times, but keep going, right? Not giving up. Eventually it happens. So that kind of grit and that kind of, resilience is probably required for you to be successful, to be quite honest.
And it's actually the same, if I think of it, it's actually the same as in architecture, right? So if you're entering the first semester in architecture, you have that idea in your head that you will have one of these books and one of these pens, and you will sit down and make the best sketch in the world, which is then the best concept, and becoming like the best, you're waiting for this genius moment to happen. Turns out in the second semester, latest, that this genius moment is not happening just out of thin air, right? But it happens because you worked for that. You worked through like a lot of models and a lot of drafts and a lot of stuff. And all these are actually failures, but they help you to evolve, to become better in what you do, and realizing what a good possible solution may look like. And that's exactly the same for being an entrepreneur, right? Just sitting there and waiting for the best product coming around is not going to happen. You have to fail your way up to success the whole time. And that's hard. It's not funny. It's not hard. Like it's just not cool, but that's the way, I think.
Is there any chance to get trained in this, in persistence?
I personally don't think you can learn that. I think it's almost a natural. And I mean, you could be supported enough where that you can afford to keep staying gritty. But I think it's a trait. I think some people have it and other people don't. I mean, like at the moment, I sit on the advisory board of Antler. I don't know if you guys know this. So I see, and Antler has these programs all over the world. You're a single founder, you have a super cool idea, but you have no clue how to build your team, right? I have no idea how to find my developer. So you go into Entrepreneurs First or into Antler, and then you find people that you can build this company with. If that model is sustainable, I don't know, but they've built a lot of really great architectural startups out of Oslo, for example. So Norway, for some reason, there's a lot of, design tech. It's kind of a hub. And that's where you learn to build the team. And so if you really have a great idea and you feel all alone and you don't know what to do, join an accelerator program. Go to Techstars, go get into one of these programs, because they will actually help you do a lot of these things that took Dénes all this time. I mean, Dénes, you had a problem on the product side, right? But then when the product worked, could you have used a little bit of help? Because you said a lot of stuff was super unprofessional and we had no clue how to do this or that. But there are solutions for that, right? So you could do that, for example.
And nowadays, much more than like 10 years ago,
yeah,
to be very honest. Sure. Like, I mean, there was this inflation of accelerator programs and like, I don't know, like founders meetings, like I don't know, like stuff like what we do right now, which was not existing like 10 years ago when we started actually, right? So, and this is like super important, but somebody like many years ago, somebody told me, founding a startup is very much like boxing. It's not about how hard you can hit, but how much you can take. And that's really true. It's really much more about how much you can take and still go up again than how hard you can hit, because this will determine at the end of the day if you will succeed or not.
Let's take these punches to the financial aspect. You said, okay, there's so much money. There are so many companies who get a lot of money to scale. Then we have also people entering the built environment industry, and with a sustainable concept, with a lot of capital. And we have one question from Martin Bittmann. There's a company called Gropius. You may have heard about this company, who is really entering with a lot of money the housing building sector, or the modular housing building sector. So they can take a lot of punches, probably, because they have the money to be funded. And Martin, you're here also in this session, raised the question, are they going to be successful?
If I had the answer to that, I'd be a millionaire, right?
Yeah,
I would love to say yes. I think my firm belief in sustainability going forward is it will be successful. How that really is for the built environment, I'm not 100% sure, but I spend all our taxpayer money on Green Deal, and I do a lot of impact and sustainability investing when it comes to energy and more sort of urban tech stack stuff. And those companies will be successful. If this in architecture and built, I honestly don't know, but my firm belief is that everything that is moving to sustainability in the next 10 years will be the better solution.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'm a firm believer.
But perhaps one question, because I think there was an example in the States. I mean, Chantzaras completely
failed. Yeah.
And so that, yeah, actually my question was, I mean, what is Gropius doing differently here in Europe? And yeah, perhaps can answer
I've
that.
seen 2 or 3 more. There's another company called Inti Technologies in Rhineland.
Inti, Leco, all these companies.
All of these. I think one of the, so I was listening to a panel in San Francisco. There's the Built World conference. And so I spent up most of last night. That was a panel asked to all the VCs there why Chantzaras failed, right? Because a lot of the Chantzaras guys now went out and are creating super successful context startups. Somebody gave me the answer, and I don't know if this is true, that the chances of this succeeding in Europe are so much greater than in the US, because in Europe, we are more used to modular housing, right? So I'm in Berlin and wir haben Plattenbauten überall, right? So people can live with the fact that there's, modularized sort of buildings. And a lot of people have said in the US that just doesn't really fly. People like their individuality. They blamed it on that. I have no clue if that's true.
And it's also like I wouldn't overstate the fact that they failed. Sure, yeah, they were already pretty big. They were pretty well funded though. But at the end of the day, still at that stage, in terms of like life cycle of a company, you always think in stages. Like if you have an idea and then you get your first funding, first customer, and later on you have like 1,000 people make 100 million in revenue, make $1 billion in revenue, make an IPO, right? So you go public. But in all these stages, the probability of success is never 100%, right? So for each and every single company, there's always a reasonable to believe chance that they still fail, no matter how long they are in their line of development, right? And I mean, at the end of the day, you said it, like Chantzaras is just one out of, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, 20 of more or less the same kind of companies. One of them failed. Probably 5 or 6 other will be, but out of this bunch, you will have some companies who endure and then just pave the way for the next wave of evolution or technology development, and honestly, based on what they do.
Timing's a bitch, right? So when I was looking at, I was running I was part of a team of a 500 million fund for Louis Vuitton. And you cannot imagine in the year 2000, what great technologies we invested in. 3D scanning of the body to then mass or custom produce you clothes that can then be sold online. Great stuff, all kinds of stuff. 10 years too early, 15 years too early. So a lot of the technologies and the startups that were solving problems back then, they were just too early. They were before their time. Yeah. And that's terrible. That's a tragedy. But yeah, it happens.
It's very interesting. So I see now at the website of Christos, I think it's spelled right. They are actually trying to change everything. So like they want to try, like they are disrupting every part of the construction industry, and that's super interesting. Like that's also I think what Chantzaras, what went a little bit wrong there. They want to change too much too fast. So I don't know if that works in the building industry, because I can imagine build industry has very specific fields, which has also its challenges. So, and you need to invest quite a lot of innovation and time or effort, money to actually disrupt the single parts. Yeah, and so like, for instance, take technical systems. Yeah, they are complex. Like we see in our startup, they are very complex. They have their disciplines. You need the knowledge there. And it's very interesting that it's very ambitious that they want to just disrupt everything at once.
It depends on the industry, right? In some industries, I would say it makes more sense just to more or less progressively go on building, right? And in some industries, and I don't know, but the built environment industry might be one of these industries where you just say, I want to make a clean cut, because all the stuff that doesn't really fit anymore. Like these processes, these technologies, they're 30, 40, 50 years old. And I don't want to get anything of this into my new business. I want to really start from a clean scratch. Like, I mean, like SpaceX, right? They didn't reinvent the rocket, but they reinvented the way how we push a rocket into the atmosphere and get it back, right? So, I mean, if they would have just started from where all the other rockets were, we're probably just building bigger rockets, right? Or the difference between horse and car. Right? It's not just going faster, it's just something very different because people realized we have 20 horses in front of my car. The 22nd horse probably won't increase much. I need something very different.
I totally agree with what Dénes is saying, because that's, you know, that's the fun stuff looking at this industry coming from automotive and manufacturing and telecom and commerce and all that stuff I've done before. I fully agree. It seems almost easier in this particular case to start from scratch because this incremental innovation is a pain in the butt, right? It's this software solution, and then you need this one, and then you need another one, and then you don't have a handover, and then that gets messy. And it's like, you know, maybe it's easier just to, start radically new.
A lot of people say, for example, just to give one more example, right? A lot of people say that Tesla was in its early days so successful because they were able to start completely from scratch and realizing that the battery is probably not best packed where the actual combustion engine sits in a traditional car, but it should be on the ground, right? Because it solves a lot of problems. But the traditional car manufacturers, they just couldn't do that, right? Because they were used to put the source of energy in front of the car. So like it might be
totally
super
agree,
simple.
Yeah.
I have been to a lecture where they really discussed why Chantzaras failed, and the assumption was that they tried to fully control the whole value creation process, like really from, let's say, acquisition to delivery, with planning and with construction, all in-house. Okay, this is understandable because, as you said, this is the only way to really control your own standards over the entire value creation process. But this only works if you are able to, let's say, use the full power of your production lines, and they didn't. So they had to do these standard jobs in their own fabrication units, and this is what basically killed them, because this is this kept them somehow alive, but on the other hand, it killed them economically.
Yeah, I mean, like there comes a certain consequence with it. If you say, like, I cut myself off all the traditional processes because they're inefficient and are going to set up new ones, you also have to make sure that your new ones are better than the old ones, right? Because if they are not, then just then you really haven't achieved anything, but just putting more and more pressure and more work on your own shoulders.
Let's pick one aspect, because we're coming to the end of the session, which is great to listen, and we could continue now for half an hour or an hour. Malak is raising the question how to protect your idea. I mean, if you start with one idea you want to change, and then you need money, take money, investors come in, and then the investors take control. So how to not lose control of the mission you want to address is Malak questioning, since companies focus on their capital and the ultimate goal to not to fail. So if an investor does not want to fail, he wants to make sure, she wants to make sure that it succeeds, and this may go against your initial idea as a startup. So is there an advice from your side how to balance that?
I don't think investors want to take over, right? They're not going to control your business. They're just going to help you get the right money. But as Dénes and I talked about it earlier, the minute you take other people's money, especially for funds it's terrible, right? Because the minute they have other people's money, they need to return that 10x to the investors. But for you as a founder, if you're going to be developing software products, there's no IP, right? You literally, you can't protect it. And so I get this from so many founders that are terrified that someone's going to steal their idea, and they're terrified of talking about it and going out and doing what they should be doing, and that is telling everybody about it to try to get customer feedback. Is there something, you know, am I on the right track? Am I building something that the world wants and needs and is willing to pay for? So, you know, do the opposite, go out and talk to people. And then in terms of protecting, unless you're building some serious hardware, you can't really protect it in that sense,
It might sound so counterintuitive, but the best way to protect your idea is to share it with as many people as you can, to get as much feedback as you can, to take that feedback and put it into your idea so that it may evolve, and so that you are, and that's the only thing you can do to protect your idea, that you're moving faster than everybody else on the market.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to do that, you need to share your idea to get the feedback so that you may move faster than everybody else. It is so hard. I was thinking the exact same way, and it's so counterintuitive, but you have to do that. There's no other way. Unfortunately, because it feels so hard, emotionally so hard to do that, but you have to do it, because otherwise you won't get the feedback, you won't get the input.
Nice. So speaking of the end of this session, I will raise two last questions. One to Dénes, by closing this round, coming back to your initial time in Dresden, where you talked about it before that you had no help except from the exist chair. So when you would found a company again nowadays, would you get in contact with the Venture Lab BE? That would be my question. Would it have helped you former days to have something like a Venture Lab BE or the Venture Lab initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like looking back, like it's rather like actually it's like funny that we really made it through all the stages without much of like actually like help. And like in the really beginning, these are simple things, right? Like a place to work with a proper table, proper internet connection. I don't know, when you build hardware, access to like a workshop or whatsoever. So like very like basic things, like really, and these basic things will help you to accelerate. Just the point that the Venture Lab offers you a place to be makes you realize that there is this other path you can walk, that there is this other potential you can go and explore. Literally by going to that place and talking to these two guys or to all the other peoples being there. And this is tremendously helpful in your situation, because this is exactly what you need to kick off in the beginning, right? Later on, you will find your own path. That's fine. But in the beginning, to make the decision between 0 and 1, between not moving and start moving, even if it's slow, this is the place where you should go.
Yeah, and then on top of it, I mean, the TUM is like one of the unicorn sort of factories in Europe, right? So if you then have all of these entrepreneurship people coming in on all these stuff that you're planning over the course of the next 9 months and stuff, that's brilliant. I mean, that's awesome.
This may be also one of the main motivations for the Nemetschek group to be a supporter and a sponsor of the Venture Lab.
I think part of our mission, which Professor Nemetschek has, is to give back to the community. So I think, he founded the Georg Nemetschek Institute of Applied AI, which is great. And we love the TUM. So if there's anything we can do to help foster entrepreneurship in this industry, we need you. We really believe we need more entrepreneurs in this sector. Instead of going out and building your little 2-man architectural firm, we're here to support, and we're whatever we can do to help bring your idea out there to the world, and maybe to fund it as well.
Great.
Great closing words.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for attending this session.
Yes.
We will place this super interesting conversation then on our website, and hopefully to see each other soon in another setting on another topic, and wish you all the best for today and this evening.
Exactly. Thank you so much. And we also want to hear your feedback. So reach out to us via email or phone or whatever. Give us feedback on our first panel here. And we're happy to discuss and support you further, and see you soon.